Hi, and welcome to the Aspire Europe Limited video series on business change management. In this module, we're going to look at the implications of individual change. My name's Rod Sowden, Managing Director of Aspire Europe, and I was also the lead author for MSP and P3M3. Well, all individuals are different. We come from different backgrounds with different baggage, and that dictates how we respond to change. So things to consider. What are the consequences of change to us? The old saying, what's in it for me or winning me? Yeah, we will respond very differently to change when we consider the consequences. I don't think in my career I've ever come up against anybody who gets very upset when you offer them a pay rise for doing less work. So consequences of change will dictate how the people react. Thinking about the organisation's history for dealing with change. Now, if an organisation has an integrity and has gone through a number of reorganisations, restructured and treated people fairly, then people are going to be more trusting in the way the change is delivered. Whereas if an organisation has acted without integrity, misled staff or pulled stunts on people that left staff demotivated, then you would be more worried about how this change is going to affect you when you come across it. Things like type of individual you are, how you react to the change, how your emotions are structured. Are you very logical, take it in your stride, or do you get very kind of hyperactive and stressed about things when you can't see where you're going? So the type of individual you are, and also considering your own individual history. So you could have been through major changes that have actually gone well for you, and therefore you see change as a really big opportunity for you. Whereas you may be somebody maybe coming to the later stages of your career who doesn't like change and doesn't want the organisation and all the hassle that comes with having to cope in a different environment. So your own individual history and your own individual perspective will be very important in working this through. And again, the nature for change. Has this change come about because some distant chief executive has mandated it to you, or is it something that you as a team have come up with, and therefore you have ownership of that change? Will greatly affect how you react to it. Before we talk in detail about the various theories of change and individuals, it's worth remembering what the learning cycle is. Because the one thing about change is people need to learn to do things in a different way. Now, we learn through experience. So if we have a concrete experience, we have to think about what's happened. So something very basic, if you put your hand in the flame of a candle, it'll get burnt. But the concrete experience is the pain of being burnt. Okay, so what would happen? You'd stand back and you'd have a think about, why did that happen? So there's your reflective observation. Why did my hand get burnt? Because you didn't know, presumably, that a flame was hot. So then we start to stand back and think a little bit further and go, well, why did my hand hurt? Okay, so that must mean that wavy thing over there, that candle, that flame must be hot, because we may not have known that it was hot. And then we'll have a little think about that again. So we've now got the abstraction, and then we'll think about practical things, like what do we do next? So then we have practical conceptualization, where maybe you'll put your hand near the flame again just to see if it warms up, but maybe not having such a bad experience. Now, that's kind of obviously quite a kind of simple example, but it's the same for everything. At the moment, you're getting a concrete experience where I'm explaining to you about change. You'll reflect on this, hopefully, and consider where your own experiences may be able to relate some of these ideas. And then you'll be able to abstract that and go, oh yeah, I've not thought about that. If we thought about that type of motivation, we might have done things differently. And then in the new experience that you're bringing in, you may well try new approaches to delivering learning to your staff, or the way you're doing change. So then there was this guy called Kolb, and he identified learning styles because certain people learning different ways. And as you can see from the guy driving the car, he's learning from what we might call pragmatism. Go as fast as you can and see what happens. Now, there are different approaches. That's the activist, let's just have a go, try it out. Maybe the sort of person that gets new software and just wants to hit all the buttons to see what it does. We call them the activist, and they just want to do trial and error. Then we've got the reflector, who would kind of have the experience linked to the cycle and spend more time thinking about what happened, reflecting on it, and what did they learn and how could they approach this better in the next phase. And then you've got the theorists, who would read all about the theory, want to know about every piece of detail, they'd spot all the inconsistencies, they'd know everything about this new piece of work they have to do before they actually started doing it. But what they're missing, therefore, is the practical application. So, you can become a great theorist on driving a car, but when you actually get in a car, it feels very different. And that's where the pragmatist comes in. They might do some research, they might do a bit of theorism, but they might want to go and do it. They'd be more likely to want to go and apply it quickly, whereas a theorist might want to keep on learning the theory. The pragmatist would want to try that theory out. So there's 4 learning styles that you need to bear in mind when you're trying to deliver change to people. There's the activists, who just want to play with things. There's the reflector, who will kind of want the experiences and to stand back and think about what they've learned. The theorist will always stand back and think more about what they've learned and read up more and more on the theory, whereas the pragmatist will want to have a little bit of theory and then give it a go. And the people you work with will be very different in the way they approach it, and it's kind of finding the right balance when you're implementing new working practices. Linked to the learning cycle, we also need to think about the stages of development, and there's the abbreviation at the bottom, KSAs. So when we think about training and being able to do stuff, there are a few things that we need to understand around that. So we need the knowledge to be able to do the job, which is kind of the theorist. We then need to have the pragmatist approach of practice, which gives us the skills. And then you'll be able to do a little bit of reflection when you get things wrong, and then you're going to have another play. And the attributes are more to do with your behaviors and your willingness to do these things. So when you're thinking about a role, we need to think about the knowledge it needs, the practical skills it needs, and the attributes. So for example, if you want to bring people into project management, the knowledge they would need is relatively straightforward. You can get that from various sources. But does that make them a skilled operator at project manager in being able to do the planning and stuff? And have they got the right attributes, the kind of drive to get the job done? So you see, it's not just about, when we think about training, we have to think about all those 3 areas. So just looking at our upside down aeroplane, if we think about learning to fly, I guess we can all see that it looks quite complicated, but we really have no idea how complicated it is until we get into an aeroplane. So there's 4 stages of development in the learning that we should consider. So first of all, we have unconscious incompetence. You look at something and go, I can do that, but you have no idea what you're letting yourself in for. So unconscious incompetence means that you don't know what you don't know about a task. Then you have conscious incompetence, where you may have read up on the theory, or you may have had a go at it and found it much more difficult. Yeah, so maybe you've sat in the plane, but you don't know how to turn the engine on. Or you can get the engine going, but you can't actually get it off the ground. So that's where we have conscious incompetence, and that's where training is really valuable. And then we become consciously competent. So at that point, we can run the plane along a runway, and we can get it to take off, and we can get it to land, and we probably get our pilot's license. And then we get to unconscious competence, where it becomes second nature to us. We don't have to think, we get in and we fly the aeroplane. Possibly more relevant to driving your car to work, or driving your bicycle, or whatever it is you do. You just get up and do it. Probably the most obvious unconscious competence is being able to walk. We learned that when we were babies, and we've never really forgotten it. Okay, so those are the stages. Unconscious incompetence, really, we don't know what we don't know. And in conscious, we become aware of our own inabilities and we recognize we need to work on our skills. And then conscious competence, normally when we pass a test or something, proves we can do a job, but we still have to concentrate. Unconscious means we don't have to concentrate anymore. Now, if you change somebody's task and change their job and give them new tasks, then you can easily end up being back to unconscious incompetence. So there may be a part of their job that they now really need to relearn through a different lens. So very important to remember this stuff when you're thinking about what you need to do to help people get through a change process. Now we have a thing called the learning dip. And as people go through these stages, their performance is going to drop. So when they're unconsciously competent, they'll be performing optimally. They don't have to think, they just get on with their job. When you need to give them new skills, they go back to initially unconscious incompetence. And then they go through the stages again of conscious incompetence. When they're doing the training, well, their performance is going to drop. When they go to conscious competence, their performance will improve and ultimately get back to being consciously competent. So it's worth bearing in mind the learning dip there. And people will make mistakes, things won't work, and we've just got to give them time to adapt and learn those new skills to be able to perform in the way that we want them to. Okay, so that's the end of this module. Hopefully there's some useful food for thought in there for you. I hope you enjoy the course, and it's time for you to have a coffee and get over all that information.